Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7 Israel, a Torah update. And as we continue to deliberate the latest developments related to Israel throughout the region and beyond, it's always important to remember how the war versus the Islamist Hamas began. On October 7th, 228 days ago, the Islamist terror groups from the Hamas-plagued Gaza Strip launched an onslaught on southern Israel, declaring war by perpetrating a massacre, murdering some 1,200 mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping 246 people, including elderly, men, women, children, and infants. 128 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. Let's now turn to our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, what can you update us with on the latest?
If there's anyone in our audience who had, for some reason, for some inexplicable and inexcusable reason, skipped our latest updates earlier this week or maybe even last week, they would have seen that it's almost the same story all over again. Almost any day now, there are fierce fights in various districts of the Gaza Strip, both in the northern part, Jabalia, in the central part or north-central Zaytun, and in the southern parts, in the outskirts of Rafah, with one small difference. The civilian population keeps moving northward towards the areas of Mawasi and Khan Yunis, thereby vacating the area in which the Israel Defense Forces would fight the 4 battalions of Hamas remaining. And one big difference, and that is the announcement by the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court in The Hague, Karim Khan, that he has suggested that charges be brought against 2 Israeli officials and 3 terrorist leaders of Hamas. Now, obviously, this is only the beginning of the road for this particular legal proceeding, but already it has caused a lot of controversy because even the very announcement that some Israeli official, that is the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense, could be found culpable for a policy in which Israel responded to the massacre, that would obviously limit the room for maneuver and the operational planning of the IDF, not only in Gaza, but also in Lebanon and on other fronts.
Indeed. Well, a couple of points that are quite interesting about this specifically. The first one is I had the opportunity, obviously, after the announcement of the prosecutor to communicate about this with a number of senior officials in various European countries. At least 3 of those countries will not abide by such an arrest warrant, irrespective of their participation in the Rome Statute, which indicates that they have also explicitly highlighted they do not believe the ICC has jurisdiction over Israel, particularly also about something that I mentioned in our previous programs, and that is Article 4, subsection 2, in which the prosecutor needs to receive an agreement from the country in question to conduct its affairs there, and it has not done so. So there are various procedural and various jurisdiction matters that relate to this that are irrelevant, that render this matter irrelevant. Nonetheless, it is severe, and therefore I do urge and call upon Senator Tom Cotton and Senator Bill Hagerty and a group of other senators in the United States who have written a letter to the prosecutor Khan before that he made his announcement and pledged that there would be ramifications, there would be sanctions against not only him, but the ICC as well. And I do hope that they will follow up on this and double down on this by fulfilling their pledge against this prosecutor, who is really, he is making a mockery not only of the rules-based order, but also of this specific court, which has time and again come into the crosshairs of too many issues related to its conduct, not only vis-a-vis Israel, also elsewhere. But let's now turn to the former Director General of Israel's Ministry of Strategic Affairs, head of the IDF's Intelligence Directorate's Research and Assessment Directorate, and currently also the director of the Middle East program at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, namely Brigadier General in Reserve Yossi Cooper-Vassel. It's good to see you, General. I will not list your entire curriculum vitae, since we would not end today's program naturally, but I'd like to immediately dive into the Gaza Strip, an area of operation that you're not strange to, and ask you about the complexities related to the operation, first and foremost in this southernmost town of Rafah. What can we expect from the various operations as the IDF is deepening its operational achievements, and at the same time also to point out over 950,000 Palestinian civilians have already relocated to designated humanitarian zones, and lo and behold, the prophecy of all those self-proclaimed experts throughout the world has not come into fruition.
I was saying all along the way, this is doable, and we can evacuate the civilians from the battlefield area and find them safer places to dwell in. And it's not easy, but it can be done, and it is being done. That's the most important thing, because Israel doesn't want to harm the civilians. We want to fight against Hamas. We have four battalions of Hamas deployed in the Rafah area, and these are the most important force. They comprise the most important force that Hamas still has in Gaza Strip, and we have to make sure that we defeat those four battalions. As we have to make sure that we defeat the rest of the Hamas operatives that are still spread all over the Gaza Strip. We have killed something like 15,000 of them. That's very impressive. But we captured several thousands. But there's still, if you even deduct the people that were injured, there are still several thousands of Hamas operatives in the Gaza Strip, and we see them operating in all over the area. So what we need to do is, first of all, to take Rafah, because this is a necessary step. It's not enough. It's not sufficient step in order to defeat Hamas, but it's a necessary step on the way to defeating Hamas. And then we have to reach a situation where we are in control of the entire Gaza Strip, so there is no military capability that is visible in the Gaza Strip, and there is no capability of the Hamas to govern the Gaza Strip. That's the other side of the mission that we have taken upon ourselves. Unfortunately, we didn't look for this mission, but it was forced upon us on October 7th, and we have to do that. And the policy of the military, of the IDF until now, was to take control of a certain area and then leave. Once you do that, the Hamas comes back to the areas that were evacuated by the IDF. So we need to adopt a different policy in which we take the area and stay. We take another area and stay. And at one point, we have to be in control of the entire territory. And we have to remember all those dreams, illusions that somebody will take it from us, somebody responsible, somebody that we can count on will take our place and run the civilian lives of the people in Gaza, of the population in Gaza, is not going to materialize, because as long as they are not convinced, anybody is not convinced that we have won the war and that Hamas is unable to operate, that Hamas is not coming back, that's never coming back, until everybody is convinced that this is a situation, nobody is going to step up and say, okay, I'm ready to take responsibility. It's not going to happen. So we have to be there all around the area and make sure that everybody understands that we won the war. I think this is going to be a very important step also in our effort to release the hostages. As long as this is not happening, there is no incentive for Hamas to go for a deal. Only when they are convinced that we are determined to win the war and defeat them, they might be ready to go to some sort of a deal that is acceptable for Israel. Or in the worst case, we shall have to free the hostages after we take control of the entire area if they refuse to go to a deal. But this is the way to really to release the hostages, to keep putting the pressure on Hamas and to defeat it all over the Gaza Strip and to control the area. Now, whether we need civil administration in order to do that, it's highly plausible that yes, we need for a very limited period of time. We shall need civil administration run by the IDF, but we might look at other alternatives once we take over the entire territory. Until we take over the entire territory and convince everybody that we have won the war and defeated Hamas, nothing is going to happen.
Mr. Owen, if we're looking at the latest reports subsequent to the visit of U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, we see that there is a certain deal on the table, so to speak, where the Americans and the Saudis are trying to reach a sort of a defense treaty pact, even though, from what I understand in Washington, the viability of such a treaty coming into force within Congress today is close to none. Nevertheless, let's say that there is some viability to it. The Americans are demanding that this is coupled with a certain peace roads, or another wishful aspiration of reaching the internationally aspired two-state solution. In reality, when both parties, namely the Israelis and Palestinians, have never been farther off when we're talking about any sense of confidence in the other side.
So we are really talking about corridors. And the question is not, are we getting to the end of the corridor and opening the last door and then see the peace table around which Mohammed bin Salman and whoever happens to be the Prime Minister of Israel at the time sit along with the US president, the matchmaker? Or are we at the first door leading into the corridor? Now, yesterday, Monday, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General C.Q. Brown, spoke in Washington, and he first echoed what General Kupperwasser just said about the need for Israel to not only clear areas in Gaza, but also hold them. Now, it's easier for an American general to say it because in the US they have no conscription, no draftees, and also very few combat-ready reserve units. So they use whoever signed on for the duration. It's not the same in Israel because the reserve brigades must be let out of Gaza and virtually everywhere in order to refresh themselves and then be called back.
There's another comparison, 48 brigades versus what Israel has.
Yes, but the global power also has Taiwan and Alaska and Europe, and so let's not get into the entire dimension. But the other thing which General Brown said, which speaks to your question, is that fighting terrorism has more to it than the military deployment and employment of forces. And this is how he ties it with the Saudi-Israeli normalization deal. In order to fight the ideology of Hamas, according to General Brown, there must be a regional outlook in which Israel is being integrated into the area, the most important manifestation of which would be the Saudi recognition of Israel and normalization of relations. And in order for the Saudis to do that, they need, he didn't say a token of, but we know that this is mostly it, they need Israel to announce that at the end of the rainbow, there will be a Palestinian state. Whether it is going to be in our lifetime, whether it is really a few years down the road, is not so important because a few months down the road, we have the elections in the United States. And President Biden, who is, of course, the head of the administration and whose subordinates are both General Brown as well as National Security Advisor Sullivan. They need an achievement, a demonstrable achievement. Whether it later collapses or not is immaterial. So what he wants Israel to say is that Israel is not opposed to the idea that eventually there will be a Palestinian state. As part of this process, Palestinians, not the Palestinian Authority per se, Palestinians will fill the vacuum which hopefully Hamas will be left out of. And it's more a matter of words than of deeds in this particular stage of the process. Also, this will help a ceasefire deal, which will bring back the hostages, or at least hostages without the.
Well, the viability of a two-state solution, I think, at this moment in time, or even down the road, is not very practical, let alone viable.
But the status quo is also untenable.
Right. Well, General Cooperwasser, I'd like to hear your take on that, and potentially also I'd like to move immediately to the northern front right after. So let's hear initially the Gaza front.
Well, first of all, on this issue of the corridor that leads to God knows what, but amongst other things, leads to normalization with Saudi Arabia, we have to remember Israel is, of course, interested in normalization with Saudi Arabia. Normal relations with Saudi Arabia is a major step forward for Israel in getting integrated into the Middle East and maybe even beyond. But Israel is concerned with the prices. It's the Americans more than the Saudis want to impose on Israel in return for making progress in this normalization process. It's both the price of stopping the war before we finish with Hamas, and this is a price Israel cannot afford, and some promises that we take very seriously, promises that we make. I mean, all these mumbo jumbo about you can make a commitment, but you won't have to keep up to your commitments. Is really strange. Is this the way to handle international commitments? We cannot commit ourselves to a Palestinian state at this point. Well, this idea of revitalized, reformed Palestinian Authority has to be proven before we move forward on that issue. And it's not about whether it's Muhammad or Mahmoud who is the head of the Palestinian Authority. It's about the narrative they adopt. And today they are totally committed, just like Hamas, to the narrative of a struggle against Israel, against Zionism, until its demise. They are chanting everywhere from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And this means that Israel should not exist. And this is what they teach their children. And the Palestinian Authority is not ready to condemn the 7th of October massacre. The Palestinian Authority is behind this move in the International Criminal Court, against all its commitments in the Oslo agreements. The Palestinian Authority pays salaries to terrorists. The Palestinian Authority incites for terror and hatred of Jews in its schools and its textbooks. The Palestinian Authority refuses to accept Israel as the state of the Jewish people. This is what we are faced with, and to believe that with this we are asked to allow them to have a state of their own, when it's clear that even if they don't fall in the hands of Hamas, and they will fall in the hands of Hamas, there's no doubt they will fall in the hands of Hamas because the Palestinian people supports Hamas. But even if they do not fall in the hands of Hamas, as Secretary Blinken said, I believe we can find a way to make sure they don't fall in the hands of Hamas. I wonder what is this way. But even if it doesn't, it's still committed to all those problematic elements of the Palestinian narrative. We have to change that. They do not accept that there is a Jewish people in the first place. They do not accept that the Jewish people has any historical sovereignty in land of Israel, what they call Palestine. And they want the British government to compensate them for the Balfour Declaration. That's where we stand. It's really ridiculous, totally detached from reality. All this talk about the Palestinian state. And we have to remember that before we touch it. And those people who are dreaming about this solution, saying that this is the only solution. Yes, once we have a totally different Palestinians, the totally different Palestinian people with a totally different narrative. Then we can move forward in this direction.
I personally am convinced that the only way to bring about a change is thinking outside of the box, and first and foremost, before statehood, before entity, or whatever you want to call it, the terminology does not matter. What matters is inserting hope that people can return to their homes with a dignified capacity of feeding their children, of taking care of their wives, and making sure that they can have a comfortable life, let's put it, without fear of being gunned down for voicing your support or joy over certain occurrences that happened in the Islamic Republic of Iran. Namely, the Islamist Hamas came out with a declaration that all those Palestinians who came out in Gaza and celebrated over Ibrahim Raisi's demise and that of Foreign Minister Hussein Amir Abdullahian will be prosecuted and will be dealt with. And we all know what Hamas means when it means be dealt with. It is killing its citizens for years. It's suppressing them and making sure that nobody raises their head. But let's turn to the Islamic Republic, since obviously it is currently faced with a conundrum at a time when still it is fighting on all fronts. The Houthis in Yemen announced that they dropped an MQ-9 for a second time in 1 week. The Iranian proxy Hezbollah has launched multiple cross-border attacks against Israel with the idea of obviously responding to that with force. Nevertheless, you see also destabilization activities by the Iranians in Syria. You're seeing the activities in Iraq with Hashd Shabi pretty much controlling the country at this point in time. What can you tell us?
Well, you have different components of anarchy and strings being pulled by Tehran. We like to see it or to depict it quite simplistically as one monster or one octopus with 8 tentacles or whatever. But the reality is probably more complicated than that. Yes, of course, there is this encouragement and there is the financing and arms being sent to the various proxies. But there are also their own interests and wishes and sometimes personal frictions between members of the leadership. And it seems as if the central authority in Tehran is right now weaker than it used to be, not necessarily because of the death of Raisi and the foreign minister, but because the operational talent that they used to have until 4 and several months, years ago, after Qassam Soleimani was killed by an American operation, this is gone. And what you see is a sort of a disorganized, haphazard operation where the Houthis may now be even bolder than their Iranian masters. Now, some of their claims are overblown.
Just some?
Yes, well, some. They have their own reasons, propaganda, psychological warfare, and they seem to have shifted some of their operations to the Gulf of Aden. Even though they keep shooting in the Red Sea, sometimes it's a Greek container ship. Sometimes they try to hit American destroyers, which intercept them. All in all, it's more of an harassment to Israel than real danger.
With dire consequences to Egypt, with dire consequences also to European economies, including Germany, which is very reliant on seabound.
That's their problem. Israel cannot solve all the problems of the world. Indeed. It has a lot on its plate taking care of its own.
Well, there is a distinct difference between the tribal composition of societies in the Hijaz, namely also in Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and elsewhere, to those clan compositions in the Palestinian controlled territories, in Egypt, in Iraq, in Syria, and elsewhere. But General Kuperwasser, I'd like to hear your take on this. We do not have very much time, and therefore, when you're looking now on the broader Middle East, does the demise of Ibrahim Raisi, his top diplomat, Hossein Amir Abdullahian, and the others within that entourage, including the governor, the Iranian governor of the Azeri district, going to impact the Iranian activities throughout the region and beyond?
I think it's not going to bring about change in the Iranian policies. I don't think this is in the cards, because it was not Raisi that was making the decisions in Tehran. It's Khamenei and the Revolutionary Guards, but definitely not Hossein Abdullahian. But I think what it may affect is, as Amir noted, it may show how vulnerable this regime is. It's both dangerous, extremely dangerous, and you pointed out several of the points that make it so dangerous. And let us remind ourselves of what happened on April 14th with the 350 projectiles that were on the way to Israel. It's a very dangerous regime, but at the same time, it's very vulnerable and weak. The fear that they had that once Raisi leaves, it's going to be unrest in Iran, because this is a sign of weakness. Shows you that the people of Iran are totally against this regime. They would like to see it disappear. You see what happens in Gaza. All over the Middle East, people are happy that Raisi was killed in an accident. And these bad news come to Khomeini and to Khamenei every day. There was Zahedi, there was the failure of the attack on Israel, and Soleimani some time ago, and so on and so forth. Many people are lost for the regime, and they are not able to defend. We saw what happened in what is attributed to Israel as a retaliation to the 14th of April attack. Israel managed to, according to the reports, hit targets that were extremely well kept inside Iran, very close to the nuclear facilities. So this is this is the message we have to learn, and what we have to do based on this message is to double down the pressure on the Iranian regime, put more pressure. If they are weak and vulnerable more than they assume, and less able to inflict damage to Israel compared with what they think they should have been able to, that's the time to put pressure on them, and especially when we see what's happening with the nuclear project. They speak now about the possibility of changing the fatwa and moving in a totally opposite direction to what they did allegedly until now, and go for a military nuclear capability. It's what are we waiting for? The director of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Dr. Grossi, has already said, look, international community, the situation is extremely dangerous. Something has to be done. And nobody's doing anything. Instead, the American representative in the UN stands in condolences for the death of Raisi, who is the president of a country that shouts every morning, death to America.
That's something that I just can't understand. I can't fathom, at a time when the Islamic Republic of Iran sends thousands of munitions to Russia to attack Ukraine, we have the spokesperson of NATO coming out and relaying the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's condolences to Iran over the demise of the leader. At the same time, we see the European Union coming out and announcing its condolences, and the United States. There needs to be a certain line here.
Let me just emphasize here. Raisi is the symbol. He's not an important political figure. He could have been if he would have succeeded Khamenei, but until now he's not that important. But he's a symbol. He's a symbol of oppression and suppression of the people. He's the symbol who stands behind the story of Mahsa Amini and all of these things. He is the symbol of all of that. How can you feel sorry for him? I don't know.
Because once you belong to the Leaders Club, you feel affinity for the members of your status who share with you the first-class lounge.
Well, that's all the time that we have for today. General Kupelwasser and Mr. Oren, thank you for your insights. I'd like also to thank all of you at home. Until our next update from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.